I personally don't think Africa's challenge is money. Africa's single biggest challenge is trust. The day we start to build trust and credibility, game over.
Tomi Davies is not simply a technology wizard and an entrepreneur in technology. He is one of the architects of Africa's innovation ecosystem, founder of the African Business Angel Network, investor, author, futurist, and a bridge between corporate legacy and frontier market innovation. Among the companies that you have invested in, how many of them have turned to become unicorns?
Only one.
Only one. That's enough. If you had only one piece of advice to provide to founders raising capital tomorrow, what would it be?
Forget the presentation. Go for the proof.
You are the creator of Poem. Tell us what it means and why is it important?
We came up with a structure that says, here are the critical components required for fast-growing technology-enabled companies. They need a proposition. What's a proposition? It's an offer of goods or services to a known customer base in a defined target market. Once that is clear, they also need an organization that will then deliver that proposition. Organization are the people who use processes supported by technology to deliver the proposition. But bringing the vision to life isn't enough. How do you measure it? And that's where the economics comes in. The economics says what happens is you deploy capital for profitability to make impact. But as an investor and as a founder, what you want to do is be sure that it's not just money, the measure, there's a time measure too. The milestones are about what has been achieved. If you have a vision, it's brought to life by a poem. That combination makes the business.
What leadership traits will become indispensable?
Collaboration. If you are not collaborating in today's world, you are dead on arrival.
Welcome to Gilles Nadia and Friends, a podcast that focuses on extraordinary individuals that you may not see every single day, but that bring a huge amount of value to life in general, to businesses, to people, to organizations, to systems, and to productivity. But before we get any further, please take a minute to follow, to like, and to share this page. And don't forget to click on the bell for notification whenever we have new material to share with you. Today, I have an extraordinary guest, a unicorn, as they call him. This gentleman, Tomi Davies, is not simply a technology wizard and an entrepreneur in technology. He is one of the architects of Africa's innovation ecosystem, founder of the African Business Angel Network, investor, author, futurist, and a bridge between corporate legacy and frontier market innovation. This is just to design a very short summary of his extraordinary background and journey, which we're going to learn just now. Tomi, welcome to Gilles Nadia and Friends podcast.
Thank you, Gilles. It's great to be here.
You traveled from far. You were in Lagos and you just came to Senegal for a few days. And I'm so happy that we can have this conversation.
It's great to be here, especially this time of year when the whole world is celebrating Salah. So Eid Mubarak was really, really a sight to behold here in Senegal. And I commend the Senegalese, for such an amazing event.
Excellent. So today, the goal is not going to be to discuss technology. It's going to really be to understand behind who you are, the movement that's behind you. Tomi, many people know you as a tech pioneer, an angel investor, a futurist, as I said before. But every pioneer has a moment when they decide to stop following the road and start building one. What was that moment for you?
Oh, that moment for me was actually when I got called to help the Nigerian government to put in a payroll and personnel information system, by the World Bank. Yes, my background had been in technology, but this was my first in-country, that is within Nigeria, large-scale technology deployment. To set context, I did 100 countries with ABB prior. So it wasn't about that. It was more about the fact that this was home country and technology.
Amazing. When you were 20 years old, let's go back. When you were 20 years old, what did you believe life would become for you? What were your dreams?
To be honest, I started out earlier in life, before my 20s. I worshiped the ground my dad walked on. So initially my aspirations was to become a lawyer like him. Then I ran into the HP 35 calculator when I was in secondary school, and that took away the logbooks. And I became enamored and fascinated by technology. Since then, by the time I was in my 20s, it was more like, what can I really do? What can I build with technology? How are we going to take technology to the next level? So my aspiration in context at that time was, can I make it to the moon? Because that was the contextual direction. You know, a man had landed on the moon, but these were Americans. Could I, as an African?
Amazing. So most people look at success as a destination. And as you know, success is the number of times you failed and learned and moved forward. What surprised you the most in bringing more fulfillment to you than you imagined? Along your journey, what has surprised you more than you imagined?
Well, what really surprised me was I thought the top of the corporate ladder was it. That, you know, bragging rights. And I became head of IT strategy. I became head of IT for no less than Marks and Spencer.
Say that again?
I became the head of IT research for Marks and Spencer.
How old were you when that happened?
I was in my 30s.
You were in your 30s and you became the head of IT
research
for Marks and Spencer's.
And
wow.
Well, to set in context, before that, I'd been head of data processing for Aquitaine.
How old were you when you were head of?
About 5 years younger than that.
Were you in your 20s still?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, in ELF, yes.
Yes.
But by the time I reached Marks and Spencer, I was in my 30s, all the way to my 40s. And really, you become head of data processing for ELF. You become head of IT research for Marks and Spencer. M&S wouldn't let me sell on the website, so I quit and I joined Ernst Young. I became the partner for e-commerce across Europe. Eventually, during the .com, I became the chief operating officer for the incubator. And, you know, my younger self would have been fascinated with all of these, but there was an emptiness. There was something missing. And that missing link didn't click back in till I came to Nigeria, came back to Africa and started working on the continent. And it wasn't even the work, because I did, like I said, I did ACES, African Integrated Payroll and Personnel Information System.
Yeah.
I did that for the Nigerian government. I helped Kenyans with the African Agriculture Technology Foundation. I helped the Congolese with the bioscience for Central and Eastern Africa. But ultimately, when I discovered founders, the fact that you could grow people, not just build businesses, I started out, like I said, building, but now I build builders.
So you build builders. Over your journey, over the 40 years, what lessons did you get from things that you might have gotten wrong? And what lessons do you keep from things that you might have gotten wrong?
The first was learning where to spend time, because that is about learning where to focus. And what I was doing, because my interests are so broad and varied, I found that I was taking a fragmented approach to life. And when I decided ultimately that, well, what I'm about is finding, then funding, and ultimately following, founders who are building the continent's future, I settled. And that's become my raison d'etre for a while now.
So you seek for founders, you help them build, and ultimately you help them take their flight on their own. You have witnessed Africa before mobile phones. At the time when there were no mobile phones, when you worked for Aquitaine, you probably did not have a mobile phone at the time. Before the fintech, before venture capital became fashionable, what do young Africans today take for granted that your generation had to fight to create?
Well, you've just highlighted it. Okay, we fought for the infrastructure. Okay, I still remember mobile operator licenses. I was a chief operating officer for a mobile network myself. I deployed over 100 base stations in Lagos to prove the data point. And everybody now takes for granted that MTN exists, that Airtel exists, that Orange exists. When we were growing up, these were dreams in people's heads. And we had to bring them out and bring them to life to create the infrastructure. So essentially, we built the roads that the current generation now has to drive on. But first, they've got to build the cars.
So you built the infrastructure that allows today the cars, and this is a metaphor, to run smoothly. What are some of the digital revolution elements that are happening right now? What are the chapters, or what is one chapter that is untold that you would like to write?
One chapter that is untold that I had to write. It is the nature of the local investor. We've always had them. Okay, and you look at any culture, whether it is collective community, whether it is the rankadede, the man at the top, or what have you, we've always had investors. And what do I mean by that? Well, the way I built, like I told you, I built 25, 30 different angel networks on the continent. How was that done?
Sorry, can you repeat that slowly? Yeah. Because for you take it for granted, but you started from no angel network.
No, there were 5.
There were 5, okay.
There were 5 angel networks.
Okay.
When we looked.
Yes.
Okay, and that was in 2011, 2012. We decided to take a look. Why? Because we're in the process of creating the Lagos Angel Network, which had been born out of my high school network of investors that decided, okay, we're from the city, we might as well do the city thing. But when one of our startups then decided to expand outside of Nigeria was when we actually took a look and says, okay, what's out there like us? And we could only find 5.
Right.
There were 5 networks. This was as of 2014 to be precise. Okay. And 2015, we started ABAN, and that's where my journey began.
ABAN, African Business Angel Network.
ABAN being the African Business Angel Network.
Yes.
That came about in we started November 2014, funnily enough. Candace Johnson, who at that time was the European Business Angel Network president, delegated one of her vice presidents, a gentleman by the name of Baybaz Altuntaş from Turkey, to come to Nigeria and personally invite me to Finland.
Right.
So we went to Finland and we had the Ghanaians there because they had a network. We had Rebecca Enonchong there from Cameroon. Dr. Sulaiman, who was my co-founder of the Lagos Angels, was there with me, as were quite a few. The young lady from South Africa, Alex Frazier.
Yeah.
Each of these, so I didn't know what had happened, but to cut the long story short, we finished the session, everybody turns around, welcome, Mr. President. They had pre-decided that I was going to preside over, and that African Business Angel Network, and that's how I become president of ABAN. Spent the next year making sure that the foundation was properly structured, because that's one of the fundamentals we don't have on the continent is governance ab initio. And I was determined that, we were going to show the world we could do this, and we could do it to the same standards that the Europeans and the Americans, Angel Capital Association, were doing. Like I said, I spent the next 10 years tripsing all over Africa. And how did I do it? It was very simple. I'd get into a city like Dakar or any other major city, and I'd ask to see the Chamber of Commerce. Why the Chamber of Commerce? Because that's where the high net worth individuals who belong to that city were. Two critical things: investors, local. But they weren't painted that way, okay? They call themselves a Chamber of Commerce. And I'd get up and I'd say, okay, guess what? How many of you here are landlords? Invariably, 6 out of 10 would be landlords. How many own at least 3 properties or more? That would drop them down to half. How many of you are planning in the next 5 years to put another building up? And that would reduce it. And it would be those 5 to 10 that I'd say, I want a special meeting with you. And they'd wonder, okay, are you into construction? Do you want to help us build? And I said, no, I've got something for you that can yield you, if you stay with it, more money than you're building. But more importantly, it will also enhance your existing investment in your city. And that was my sales pitch. Right. So, of course, everyone wants to know, really? We're going to make more money? So, of course, they'd come to the next, and I wouldn't do it at that session. I'll say, if you want to know more, I'm here for the next 3 days, day after tomorrow. That gives them a day's break. I'm going to have a session. And half of them would show up, but all I needed were 5. Once I got 5, it was right. Here's what the deal is. How many people here have ever heard of angel investing? 1 at the most. What's that? Are we going to grow wings? Are we going to fly? And then I'd break it down. It is about helping entrepreneurs at the beginning of their building journey. And then you see the eyes glaze over. And then I'd say, okay, how many of you know what a unicorn is? And they look at me again. Oh, yeah, unicorn with the hair, with, the horse with the horn. And I say, no. A unicorn is a company that is worth over $1 billion. And you can see everybody laugh and say, in Africa, $1 billion, you must be joking, and so on. And we went through this. But I was fortunate. Why was I fortunate? I'd met Oliver when I was head of IT research at Marks and Spencer. Mm-hmm. And he was from South Africa. What I found fascinating about him was, here's a Jewish white guy who's a card-carrying member of the African National Congress. It sounded like an oxymoron to me. It's like, how is that even? I thought you were the guys oppressing Mandela. He says, no, we're trying to get him out. Yeah. So Ollie returned to South Africa when Mandela came out. Yeah. And I, of course, as I said, went to Nigeria, get this call, and Ollie wants to start a comic, a superheroes comic book. Oh, sounds good. Tell me more. Oh, well, you guys have the Alaafin of Oyo. You have Mansa Kanka Musa, and we want to do Chaka the Zulu, in South Africa. I says, okay, sounds great. But then looked, sorry, I'm a scientist. My background, don't forget I'd done the .com bus, which I didn't tell you about, but I can come back to that. But I was the guy who raised 100 million and it went up somebody's nose. But, so of course, scrutinized when I ended up in Cape Town with Ollie, and it was like, I studied this. Have you guys ever heard of Roy of the Rovers? Oh yeah, the soccer. And we ended up with Super Strikers. And what made Super Strikers unique and resonate with me was, one, most people don't know this, but it was the first technology transition. Until then, artists would sketch, okay? And to get it digital was a challenge. So we came up with the scan and color mechanism. Well, that's what Striker was. So the artist would sketch the outlines, then it would be scanned, and then the coloring would be done electronically.
Wow, I didn't know
So that was the technology innovation of Super Strikers at the time. And in Nigeria, we called him Sheikhs Okoro. In South Africa, it was Sheikhs Mokena to reflect the local. Remember me, I'm very local, because I believe that is where everything emanates. I'm not a top-down, I believe grounds up. Mm-hmm. We ended up with this comic that at Top Flight was doing about 500,000 copies a month across 16 countries. Mm-hmm. And that's when I discovered that's what was called angel investing. But I was more excited about the jobs we created. And everybody's looking at me as if, you're selling a comic. What's that? Says, no, we've created 5 jobs in Kenya. So the whole concept of social impact, that's how I discovered that was my focal point and that was my main interest, yeah.
And through the founders, through the various investors that you manage together, obviously companies grow and scale. And if you were in Silicon Valley, there's so much money floating around that many companies get investors' money. Why some of the brilliant African founders struggle to scale?
Because first and foremost, it's contextual. Okay. You can't give what you don't know. And we all take scale as, it's just you. But when you're starting, think about it. You are no different, okay, than the mom and pop shop down the road. Mm-hmm. You're doing everything yourself. You have to do your accounts. You have to do your buying. You have to do your selling. You have to do your operations. You're running everything yourself.
Yeah.
However, flip at Full Flight, what happens? You become a corporate entity with a governing board, with committees on the board, with an executive management team, that is managing different aspects of the business independently of each other. Now, that transition, that journey, which I call from bootstrapping to Series A, mm-hmm. is something, even till today, founders starting out don't understand. They don't see it as a journey, okay? And that's why I say the best way to see it, just think of, fortunately for me, I have the privilege of being married to a school teacher and a school owner. And that's how we look at it. So as a founder, you're coming in at nursery. So what I do is I look after nursery founders. Once they're ready, they go to primary, okay? Primary investors are venture capital.
Yeah.
By the time you're getting to secondary, that's private equity. University, Series A, institutional investors. So that parallel journey for founders became paramount.
So you spoke about unicorns earlier. Mm-hmm. That was the way for you at the beginning to capture the attention of potential investors.
Correct.
Among the companies that you have invested in as an early investor, mm-hmm. how many of them have turned to become unicorns?
Only one.
Only one. That's enough.
But then I also discovered, and that's why I don't talk about unicorns anymore. In fact, I still remember there was a whole buzz on social media when I said from unicorns to gazelles. Mm. Okay, I wrote an article on that. And the thinking was this: unicorns are very Americocentric.
Yeah.
Valuation is important within the United States context. For us in Africa, it's not so much about the valuation as it is about the other aspects. Yes, we have unicorns. We've got about 8, 9 of them now. Okay. But by and large, it's not their valuation that I find of interest. What I find of interest is their job creation.
Yeah.
How many jobs they've created. What I find interesting is their fundamental change of people's habits. Mm-hmm. Let me see, you mentioned fintech, for example. Paga, okay, came along in Nigeria, and the same in Kenya with Safaricom's oh my God, what's the name? It'll come to M-Pesa.
M-Pesa.
And what did they do? The governments needed to get rid of paper money because cash was expensive, to to manage and they wanted to digitize. How do you do that? If somebody had told you, like Tayo Oviosu knew, and he's the driver of Paga, and that's how come I have this inside track. But if somebody had told you that just 10 years ago, that you'd have 5 million Nigerians carrying POS systems instead of large wads of cash, nobody would believe you. What would they be doing with POS? But that's the exchange, that's the cash exchange mechanism we now have. So it's about understanding the local culture enough to infuse the technology in a compatible way that enhances the life value of the individuals.
Thank you for that. Even though my next question is not exactly up your alley, there is a huge opportunity for Africans. I was listening to Chairman Aliko Dangote recently, and he was saying he wants to do for Africans what the Microsoft, the Amazon of this world have done for Americans. And so he wants to take, I can't remember if it's 15% of his company's value and put it as an IPO for people to be able to buy shares. What would you say to the Africans and the young people, particularly listening to us, about that opportunity? Is it worth looking at? Is it worth putting a bit of money in it? What do you think?
You know, I'm a big fan of Aliko's, okay, given what he's done. And people see him now because of the oil, you know, the dramatic effect he's had on oil. But Aliko's done the same with sugar in Nigeria. He's done the same with cement in Nigeria before attacking the oil industry. He lost his shirt on technology. That's why he stayed clear.
He's a smart man.
Very smart man. When the whole telecoms licensing thing came along, he tried to play, but he very quickly found out, I'll leave this to Mike and those who understand it, which is what he's done. Now, in terms of what he's doing and where we're going with that, I personally don't think Africa's challenge is money. Africa's single biggest challenge is trust.
Yes.
The day we start to build trust and credibility,
there's not stopping us.
Game over.
Got you. If you had only one piece of advice to provide to founders raising capital tomorrow, what would it be?
Forget the presentation. Go for the proof.
Forget the presentation. Go for the proof. Got you. Tomi, you're an author. The author of investment-worthy startup, but I think you've also written a book with, what's his name? Brian Tracy?
I've written with Brian Tracy. Before Brian Tracy, I wrote with my schoolmates from the University of Miami. Even after Brian, I wrote The African Project Manager.
Yes. Which
is based on my experiences as a project manager. I was one of those crazy people that was certified by the Americans, the British, and everybody as a project manager. And I had to harmonize project management. So those were the 3 books that came before Investment Worthy Startup, which is 2023, and touch wood, African Angel should be out next year.
Okay, so you're continuing to write, which is great, great news. But for Investment Worthy Startup, you are the creator of Poem. I love poetry. But Poem is a framework.
Yes.
Tell us what it means and why is it important?
All right. Well, do you mind if I tell you how it happened before?
Yes, please.
Okay. I was the chief operating officer for futurewealth.co.uk, which was the Ernst Young incubator during the .com bubble. We raised over $100 million for a startup called Boo.com. It was quite unfortunate because one of the founders, unfortunately, had a challenge with his nose, if you get what I mean. Yeah. And rather than the company go in the direction it should have, it ended up getting bust inside of 2 years. I think it's even in Wikipedia today. It made the record books.
Yeah.
Consultancies, Big Five consultancy.
Yeah.
It was immediately after that we had to do a forensic analysis. What actually happened? Those forensics led us to a framework that says, you know what? SMEs are fine. We understand them, but they're limited because the SME focus ultimately is to generate enough funding for the owners to deliver dividends to them on an annual basis.
Yeah.
So the concept of selling an SME ab initio wasn't there.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the first thing. Then we went to the corporate world. Now, remember my background was in corporate. So it was like the governance requirements alone for corporate world were overwhelming. So during the forensics, we came up with a structure that says, here are the critical components required for fast-growing technology-enabled companies. They need, vision is taken for granted. I fine-tune that. But they need a proposition. What's a proposition? It's an offer of goods or services to a known customer base in a defined target market. Once that is clear, they also need an organization that would then deliver that proposition. What do you mean by organization? Well, it's the people who deploy the processes underpinned by technology. And so the economics of that is how much capital did they raise and how are they going to be profitable? And the last part was, of course, what's the technology? Which is we were just at the very early stages of internet at that time. So cloud and all the nuances, which we were postulating, people were looking at as futuristic. So that's how we ended up with Poet, and I left it. But then when I came to the continent in 1999, Super Strikers and all of that, I started engaging with founders. And that's when I took all my old notes, dusted it off. And in 2013, I rewrote the framework as the POEM framework. Now, what's the POEM framework? The POEM framework says if you're going to build a real startup, what's a real startup? That means explosive growth is a fundamental prerequisite. The value you are creating has so much inherent demand that if you meet it, you have explosive growth. That's the fundamental premise that sits underneath a startup. So, right, I have one. How do you know you have one? Well, let's start with your vision, which is where POEM starts. What's your vision? Oh, I'm solving this problem. Define the problem. Who has that problem? And what value would they place on a solution? Are you with me? Before we talk about your solution, let's talk about the problem and who has it. Once we understand that, the question then becomes, all right, what's your solution? And how does it compare with how they're solving the problem today? Once you can answer those, then the next question is, all right, fine. How will you bring your solution to life? What's the strategy? So problem, solution, strategy. That encapsulates the vision. Once we've got clarity on that, we then jump into the framework itself. Why? Because what POEM does is it brings that vision to life. How does it do that? Well, we start with the proposition. Like I said earlier, what's the proposition? It's an offer of products or services to a customer base in a known market, right? Cool. But you don't start with the product service, which is where 9 out of 10 founders start. They're already building. I'm saying, no, forget that. Stop. Which market? Because you can never be bigger than your market. And the better you understand your market, the better your chances of success. So start with the market. What's the size? What's the population of the, who's running in there in terms of competitive forces? What kind, of compliance will you have to have with regulatory environment? So understanding the intimacies of the geography that you're about to attack. Once you do that, you then step into and say, all right, who are the customers? Because once you know the market, understanding the customers becomes slightly easier. But what you want to do is on layer, whether it's business to business, business to customer, business to government, business to customer, whatever the structure is, it is about grouping your customers in a way where you can understand some fundamentals. What are those fundamentals? For each customer in full flight, what is it going to cost me to acquire this customer? Once I've acquired them, how much are they worth to me over the lifetime that they are with me? Because if you can't understand that, your chances of making money through are slim to none.
Yeah.
Now, once you understand your customers, you then drop into exactly what your product service offering for them is. How do you design it? How do you develop it? How do you distribute it? How do you price it? And how do you support your customers for the lifetime of your product service offering? So your proposition is that product service offer to customers in a market. Once that is clear and we can see it, we then drop into organization. The O of poem. What is organization? Organization are the people who use processes supported by technology to deliver the proposition. Let me see if I can break that down. Who are the people? Well, we talk about who owns the company. Read that as cap table. Who runs the company? Read that as the board, both executive and non-executive. Who works for the company? The employees. And that leads to ESOPs. I'll come back to things like that. Who partners with the company? If you are not collaborating in today's world, you are dead on arrival.
If you're not collaborating in today's world, you are dead on arrival. Very important to understand.
Hence my title at TVCLabs, Collaborator in Chief.
Yeah.
And once you know who the people are, the next is, what are the processes? How do they get things done? How do they buy? How do they make? How do they sell? How do they operate? Are they standardized? And most importantly, how do they govern? These processes are how people get things done. In today's world, the next one, which is why it changed from poet to poem, is because I brought technology into the organization. Why is that? Well, if we're talking on startups, I start with the definition of you must touch a minimum of 1 million customers if you're B2C, okay? And 10,000 customers if you're B2B. You cannot do that today without technology. Hence, technology. So, on technology, what's the architecture? What sits in the cloud? Okay. What sits on my lap or in my hand? What is the user interface that I go through? And what is the security protocol that makes everything workable? So, once you understand the people, you understand your processes and your technology, you have the organization that delivers the proposition. And that combination makes the business. Those are the elements, the fundamental elements that bring that vision to life. But bringing the vision to life isn't enough. How do you measure it? And that's where the economics comes in. The economics says what happens is you deploy capital for profitability to make impact. I hear that. What's that? Well, capital starts from bootstrapping, which is the founder's funding. And as an angel investor, which is this, everybody says now, says no, family and friends are next. Go to your dad. I came and said, my dad doesn't have money. I says, yeah, tell him to give you £1 and put him on your cap table. It's not about the amount. It's about the principle that he trusts you with money. If your family doesn't trust you with money, why would an external investor? So that's sort of the beginning. Bootstrap, family, friends, angel, and then of course, venture capital, private equity. I talked about that earlier, that capital journey. How much are you raising? That capital is deployed, okay, is burnt.
Yeah.
Actually, that's why we call it burn rate. It is burnt as expenditure, but that expenditure is being burnt with an expectation that it will generate revenue that supersedes the expenditure to create profitability enough not only to pay taxation, but to return multiples of the original capital raised.
Yeah.
And this is all happening while the SDGs are being achieved. There's 17 SDGs. I won't bore you with all the details of them, but gender equality. How many women are you employing? Jobs created. How many jobs have you created? You start to get the idea. You can't build without impact. It's not possible. It's a question of what impact you decide to focus on. And that makes up the economics of the startups. Now, that's all nice. But as an investor and as a founder, what you want to do is be sure that it's not just money, the measure, there's a time measure too. So the economics is focused, like I said, on impact of money. The milestones are about what has been achieved today. Oh, we've incorporated, we've hit our first million, we've done. What are those achievements? Given those achievements, what are the challenges in terms of opportunity challenges, associated risks, assumptions underpinning the risks, the mitigants of those risks, the probability of the risk occurrence, etc. So you're looking at challenges critically, and then looking at the targets. Where you headed? How long is it going to take you to get there? What are the barriers to you getting there? And what are the underlying assumptions, again, you've made that you will get there? So the achievements, the challenges, and the targets crystallize the milestones. So if you have a vision, it's brought to life by a poem, which is the proposition delivered by an organization, measured by the economics as you traverse the milestones. And that is what the book's all about. I trust that helps.
It does help. And I know the poem in itself is extremely helpful for early, mid, and long-term development of startups. So let's imagine you encounter the next billion-dollar idea from somebody who's creating a startup. What are the 3 things that you would be looking for right away?
Founder. I'd be looking at the founder's ability to articulate his vision beyond known persons. That's always the first challenge. The second is I'd be looking at the founder's ability to accept criticism.
Why criticism, and why is that important?
Because what I've found, if you are not in a position to reflect and change, then your ability to grow is strategically reduced. Yes. It's just that fundamental.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the second. And then the third is positioning. It sounds trivial, but I could give you too many examples of startups that started in one particular way and ended up in a totally different way. Whether you want to talk about Facebook or you want to talk about Amazon, whether you want to talk about Paystack or you want to talk about PiggyVest, I could go on. It's not really, that's why I said it's about the people you're creating value for and what they need.
Yeah. Have you ever said no to a founder and regretted it after?
If you haven't, then you're not an investor. So the answer is yes. And I challenge any investor. If you have not had that experience, then you haven't invested enough. But if you're continuously investing, yes, you can't get them all. Why? Because you're going to be focused on what you know about, what your background has brought you, what you've been exposed to, what your knowledge base is all about. So if somebody's coming outside of those quarters, the chances are you won't, no matter how open-minded or optimistic you are, you may not acquiesce to whatever is being asked. And that's happened to me a number of times and continues to happen.
So the opportunities missed, but maybe it's just the lessons that you learn along the way.
Correct.
One of the many things that you have in your portfolio is an extraordinary understanding of AI. And so one of the keynote themes that you use when you speak is focused on AI and the emergence of the cognitive leader. What worries you more? artificial intelligence becoming too powerful or human beings becoming too dependent?
Neither, actually. What worries me is that people stop thinking and AI does all the thinking, which is even more fundamental. And that's why I think it's critical.
So let's pursue with that idea. What worries you is that human beings stop thinking.
Correct. They delegate thinking to AI.
Right. And we become very passive in the day-to-day life now with all the tools that we have to do different things. The other thing that really strikes me is people say that AI is going to, fearmonger. This happens with new technologies. Happened at the time of the internet bubble as well. It happened at the time of the mobile. And
I go even further back.
Yeah.
I go back to when we first got electricity. And when people said it does fry people.
Yeah.
But that was what was being pushed rather than the opportunity. But I hope that context.
It absolutely helps the context. People say that 50% of the jobs are going to be lost because of AI. When you speak to some of the specialists, they actually look at it from a very different standpoint. If you get the knowledge of usage of AI, you actually enhance your job opportunities. So what human skills will become priceless with AI emerging as a useful tool?
Wisdom. You can't automate wisdom.
Yeah.
That's a single human capability machine will never reach.
Similar question. What leadership traits will become indispensable?
Collaboration. Your ability to work with other human beings in the advent of everybody knowing what everybody knows.
So it's interesting because it makes me think that the human being that understands that change is the only constant, and therefore AI is just another change, that human nature changes much slower than the IT change particularly. The human being and the leader who understands that usually wins. Do you believe AI will create a better world for our children or simply a faster one?
Well, what AI is going to do is actually expose bad leadership. And that can only be a good thing from where I sit.
Frequently, you argue that frontier markets often innovate faster because necessity drives invention.
Correct.
What can Silicon Valley learn from Lagos?
I actually prepared for this. When I saw those questions, I had to say, okay, how would I really respond? Because if I look at Silicon Valley and I look at Lagos, it automatically sets a context of startups as being what we're talking about. Now, what I think Silicon Valley lacks that Lagos has is the constraints founders have to operate under are systemically standard. And 8 out of, if not 9 out of 10 Silicon Valley founders would not start under those conditions.
They would not what?
They wouldn't start,
right?
Let alone continue under those conditions.
Yes.
So I think the constraint-led innovation is something that Silicon Valley could learn from Lagos.
Content-led innovation, absolutely. What can London learn from Nairobi? And whilst you think, I remember going to Vodafone, my client, which a lot of people in Africa particularly don't understand, and seeing the people from Safaricom training the people from Vodafone.
You got
it. In, a mobile pay. We have here in Africa a technology that is well advanced compared to the technologies around the world. The way people pay now is based on the mobile.
Yeah, so I actually looked at it slightly different because, as you know, I do live in the UK and in Nigeria. And for me, I think it's the fact that Nairobi adopts things that work, not necessarily the fruits of legacy. Whereas in the UK, we're looking at for the next incremental legacy.
Yeah.
And that's why mobile is just getting to where it is compared to what it is on the continent.
Final question on this same vein. What can New York learn from Accra?
From Accra?
Yeah.
Well, business in Accra always starts typically with trust. In Europe, it's transaction. And I think they could probably learn a thing or two from that standpoint.
Thank you. If you could invest in only one African sector for the next 20 years, where would you place your bet?
Oh, same place I've always invested. People. It's very simple. It's a no-brainer.
Let's go a bit faster. I would like you to use wherever you can only one word to answer the following questions, if possible.
Okay.
Best investment you've ever made?
Angel Investment 101 by the World Bank, which cost me, I think it was $650.
Worst investment?
Shooting my ego.
Favorite book?
Right now, Perceptions, Aurelius.
Okay. Most underrated African leader?
The local African leader who is never written about.
The local African leader who is never written
Who's never written about. They exist, they run the continent, and it's because of them that the continent continues to thrive.
Thank you. Most overrated business trend?
Ooh. Because it's used generically, I'd say technology adoption.
One company you admire?
Ooh, it's still Microsoft.
One habit that changed your life?
Reading every day.
Reading every day. Reading is back in fashion, ladies and gentlemen. A person who influenced you profoundly?
Jesus Christ our Lord.
Amen. Amen. The future belongs to?
The future belongs to the true. Those who are true to themselves and true to others, transparently.
Success is?
A good night's rest.
Success is a good night's rest. Thank you very much. I'd applaud, but let's carry on. What is a belief you hold today that most people disagree with?
That Africa doesn't need cash. Africa needs trust.
Africa doesn't need cash. Africa needs trust. It's very interesting. I remember the British campaigning, and they still do today, on the basis of trade, not aid, right? And when you look at what happened in some certain African countries in the West African area, the British, with this particular policy over the last 10 years, have overpassed or overcome or run faster than the French. And some of the investments, for instance, in Senegal, there's a lot of investment that England never had before. They were nowhere, and the French were further. If you lost everything tomorrow, what would remain that nobody could take away from you?
My brains, my reputation, my experience.
When the final chapter of your story is written, what do you hope the title will be?
He showed us how to build builders.
What do you hope your grandchildren will say about you? Not what you built, not what you earned, not what you invested, who you were.
My grandpa, just like my great-grandpa and my great-great-grandpa, helped all of us build this continent.
Excellent. Some of my closing questions now. Time flies. Tomi, imagine a young African listening to us today, listening to this podcast from Dakar, Lagos, Kigali, Accra, Nairobi, or Johannesburg. They have talent, they have ambition, and a dream bigger than their circumstances. What would you tell them to do tomorrow morning when they wake up?
Okay, well, tomorrow morning when you get up, that is before you check social media, before you complain about what you don't have, spend an hour building something, okay? Learn a skill, talk to a customer, write a proposal, build a prototype, solve a problem for someone. Dreams are important, okay? But futures are built by people who show up consistently and do the work when nobody's watching. That, more than talent, is where opportunity usually hides.
Tomi, we're coming to an end. What really strikes me is how generous you are. Generous with your time, generous with what you do. And this conversation was more than just about your journey. It was really to bring out for the people listening to us, to bring out something that you fundamentally believe in. It's a conversation about possibility. If you have the right kind of mind frame, everything is possible.
Correct.
And in everything you said today, everything you say on a daily basis, I'm lucky to be able to call you my friend. You really convey that. Where does that optimism come from?
The art of the possible, as I call it, is a mindset. Okay, it's a framed mindset because it's about choices. You can choose to believe the world is going to fail, or you can choose to believe the world is going to succeed. You don't control either. But whatever you think, frame sets everything else you do. So I choose the positive, and I encourage everybody to believe that, yes, we can build a better tomorrow. And if I look around, we have. When I started this whole African Angel thing, for example, we were lucky if we got 100 million in inbound investments from everybody else. But as the rest of the world has seen that, hey, hang on, these guys are really serious. We're now talking in billions of dollars invested, no longer hundreds of millions. So that is what I mean by the art of the possible. I still remember being asked when I first talked about angel investing, "Oh, Tomi, what are you going to do? Grow wings?"
You said that at the beginning. Whatever you think, whatever you believe, frames the possibilities.
That is it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tomi. Thank you,
pleasure.
everybody. Don't forget to follow us. Don't forget to click so that you're notified every single time that a new content is shown. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
All the best.